All right, I got a reading for you today from Kitchen and Table Wisdom. It is said that the Christian mystic Teresa of Avila found difficulty at first in reconciling the vastness of the life of the spirit with the mundane tasks of her Carmelite convent. The washing of the pots, the sweeping of the floors, the folding of laundry. At some point of grace, the mundane became for her a sort of prayer. A way she could experience her ever-present connection to the divine pattern, which is the source of life. She began then to see the face of God, even in the folded sheets. People can most easily recognize mystery when it presents itself in dramatic ways. The person who heals for unknown reasons when all hope is gone. The angelic visitation, the life-altering coincidence. We seem to be able to hear God best when he shouts. Moses required a burning bush. Jesus' disciples needed him to feed a multitude with a single fish. Yet mystery is as common as a trip to the grocery store. In The Guide for the Perplexed by E.F. Schumacher, he notes that the endless debate about the nature of the world is founded on differences in the sensitivity of the eyes that behold it. We can only see what we have grown an eye to see. Some of us can only notice miracles. Some of us can only see in times of crisis. Yet we can all learn to see God in those folded sheets. Soon after I moved to California from New York, I planted a vegetable garden. I'd never seen fresh vegetables except in the supermarket. And the first year, I found an endless fascination in this tiny garden. I especially loved the lettuce, which I had planted tightly in a square, whose edges I harvested for dinner every night. One evening, I'd gone out to pick the salad as usual and ran a hand lightly over the crisp green square of lettuce leaves, marveling at its vitality, almost as if it were bubbling up out of the ground. Suddenly, the words from my childhood came back to me, words that I had heard countless times over the dinner table of aunts and uncles and knew by heart, words that I heard now for the first time. Blessed art thou, O Lord, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Far from being the usual meaningless mumble, these words suddenly were a potent description of something real, a statement about grace and the mystery of life itself. Up until then, I had taken this blessing as a theory or a hypothesis, someone's idea of how things worked. I had no idea that these familiar words were simply a description of something true. I had never witnessed them happening in the world before. I had done ritual the way I had done life, automatically. Life became habit, something done without thinking. Living life in this way does not awaken us. Yet any of our daily habits can awaken us. All of life can become ritual. When it does, our experiences of life changes radically, and the ordinary becomes consecrated. Ritual doesn't make mystery happen. It helps us see and experience something which is already real. It does not create the sacred. It only describes what is there and has always been there, deeply hidden in the obvious. So I wanted to start today with a little quote. I was looking around, last year I spoke this month and it was on gratitude, and this year we switched to Thanksgiving. And at first I started being like, well, those are really the same thing, aren't they? And I looked around and I found this great quote by a guy named Tim Keller. He said, "It is one thing to be grateful. It's another to give thanks. Gratitude is what you feel. Thanksgiving is what you do." And so I started thinking a lot about that, and what that is that's how we are out in the world. That's what our Thanksgiving is how we behave outside in the world to everyone else. This last month in seminary, we had to write a personal code of ethics, which was interesting because we had examples of other people who'd written their own personal code of ethics, and we had the example of the seminary's code of ethics that we could work from. And we had the whole month to do it, but I kept sitting with it like, I don't know what to write. What am I going to, this seems like such a big monumental task to do this. And I kept meditating, and finally one morning I realized my work has not been to struggle with how I act out in the world. I tend to be, although I've proclaimed to all of you sometimes I'm an asshole, that's okay. But for the the most part, my work in the world has been that I am generous in giving of my time, and I try to go above and beyond for the people that I love and I care about. But the thing I haven't done was treat myself with that. So I realized my personal code of ethics wasn't some mantra or experience of like, here's what I need to go out into the world and do as I become a reverend at the end of this year, and here's what I commit to doing. What I needed to do was make a commitment to how I would be willing to treat myself. So I sat down and I found some quotes, and then I wrote things out, and I want to share the 5 things that I wrote down here. I wrote, I choose to be vulnerable with myself, allowing myself to go deeply into my feelings and who I am without judgment and with loving kindness. I choose to be gentle and kind to myself, especially to the inner child within me. I choose to seek out peacefulness and peace of mind through meditation, mindfulness, continued self-awareness, and evolution and expansion of my spiritual work and life. I choose to cultivate and harvest more self-love, joy, patience, and gratitude in my day-to-day life. And I choose to accept myself in as many ways possible to foster my growth, uplift myself, and to welcome myself home with wholeheartedness. And I thought a lot about that, and that's really what our Thanksgiving is, that action out in the world is how we treat ourselves. And I know we've talked about that in here before, about how love your neighbor as yourself has to be about starting with the way that you love yourself. And if we're not willing to turn all of that back into ourselves, we really can't be of service out in the world. And so I wanted to ask all of us, like, maybe this is something I actually said in my seminary class, I think we need to actually have everyone write a personal code of ethics. Like, the whole world needs to write a personal code of ethics. Like the government, people in the government, people in the city council, in our schools, have our teenagers and our kids do this. How would it change the world if we all felt like this is something we were aspiring to and living up to? And so I wanted to kind of call us to that place. And you don't necessarily have to go and do it in a physical thing, although I found that writing it down sort of sealed it in this way. Like it made it, like she was saying in the book, like almost a sacrament. It made it sacred, because it was like something I wasn't just saying to myself, like, oh, I'm gonna try to do this. It was like, by writing it down, it was like a commitment and a contract that I was making with the divine and with my community around me. And the reason I wanted to read it is because I think we also have to hold each other accountable for things. We've had some things coming up in seminary this last couple months where there's some uncomfortable feelings, and it's like we're past the honeymoon stage, everyone calls it now. We're into our 2nd year of a master's program. People have things that come up, we all do. But sometimes there's things where it's like, ooh, can we go back to when it was just really easy and calm and quiet and fluffy, And the answer is no. We can't go back to that. Because the truth of the matter is, we all have life that comes up and flows out of us that sometimes we can't even control or contain. This whole year, I got into a car accident, not of my own fault. In January, I was like hit by a food truck door that slammed into my car. And, I've been in pretty much consistent neck and shoulder and back pain this entire year from it. And it's made my spiritual work more of a struggle, because I realize, like, I want to stay in that pain and that discomfort and say, but it hurts, but I don't feel good. Why do I want to go out of my way to do extra work today to, like, do my meditation? Sometimes just to sit still for that 10 or 15 or 25 minutes hurt. And that's another thing I really realize is how often do we just push away the things that will help us and will help us grow and change, even in spite of our physical circumstances that sometimes feel really crappy. And what can we do to help ourselves push beyond that? And I think that's what some of the Thanksgiving is it's what our action is out in the world. And I know there's been part of me that wants to sometimes just give up and quit. To quit seminary, to quit life, not in the sense of life, but some of the things in life. And I think we all face that, but we don't talk about that stuff. We don't say that to our friends at coffee. We're like, oh, how's your job going? How's work been this week? How's your family? But there isn't this place where we just go into these like hard, uncomfortable situations very often and say, I'm having a hard time. And I want to call us to that in this place. This place isn't just about what we come and do on Sundays and when we have a potluck and extra people show up and, we have a great time and we have a great community. But it's also about how we can be of support and real, true community to one another and to people when there's life happening. Because life doesn't ever stop. It never stops. I've used this one before, but I love it's a quote from a TV show that I love, and it's the mom says to the daughter, the merry-go-round never stops. You can never get off. It's just what it is, And so I really just felt like I wanted to just present that to all of us as a call to action in a way for our own selves, where we want to go inside and where we want to look at what we're putting out into the world and what we're putting even into ourselves. I know for me, I can often say, our friend is in town, Danica, she can attest to this. I will tell her the most uplifting, spirit-centered thing that she should be nice to herself and take care of herself and do all this stuff, but I don't do that for myself. And I'll argue with her and she'll say, but you should take that same advice. And I'm like, we're talking about you here. This isn't about me. It's not about me. So I wanted to share some more quotes with you too. Happiness cannot be traveled to, owned, earned, worn, or consumed. Happiness is a spiritual experience of living every moment with love and grace and gratitude. And I know that a lot of times I end up talking about things that this is just a message that I'm supposed to be receiving for myself. And that's why I come up here and I share from my own personal life and my own struggles and my own stories, because I know everybody out here is struggling from these things. We all do. Like I said, I just don't think we're very comfortable sometimes about saying it out loud and really talking about it. And I want that to change for the communities that I'm in. I want to show up, like I said, and choose to be vulnerable to myself and other people, knowing that hopefully people can then say, oh, I want to be vulnerable as well. I want to step into this space. I had, at the bottom of my personal code of ethics, I wrote in a little story that I had read, and Brene Brown published a new book this last month that was about daring to lead, and so it's like a leadership book, and so I've been reading it. And one of the stories that she talked about was a guy who was an admiral, and he was a Vietnam POW, and he was one of the longest held captives. It was 5 or 6 years that he was there. And she was interviewing him, and this is some of the stuff that he said. He said, this is a very important lesson. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. And he said, she asked him, who didn't survive? And he said, the pure optimists. And she said, really? He said, yeah, because Christmas would come and go, and they would be sure, I'm going to get out by Christmas, and it would pass. And then I'm going to get out by Easter, and Easter would come and go, and they wouldn't be out. And eventually, he said, they died of broken hearts. But what he learned was it was okay to have that faith still, to trust that God had some hand in this and some control, even in the midst of the most brutal situation that seemed untenable and unsurvivable. And what I realized and what I wrote in that was that for myself, this spoke to me because I've treated my inner child and my true self as a prisoner of war. I've held myself captive. I've tortured myself. Long after my family members stopped saying mean things and most of the society people that I was around stopped saying mean things, I kept repeating that stuff. I held on to it. So I held myself captive. And what I realized I wanted to do was, one, not lose the faith. But secondly, to realize that in order to do my spiritual work and to be of service to others, that I must face, love, and release the captor in me. And how many of us are being held captive by our own beliefs? I reckon it's all of us in here. You know, most of us aren't in third world countries right now, or other places where it's clear that the oppression is being put upon us by outside forces. A lot of the harm that we feel in our lives is self-inflicted. And that's a hard pill to swallow as well, because then all of a sudden we have to take personal responsibility for the experience that we're in. And I think I told this joke the time before last. Another Brene Brown, bless her heart, I love her right now, that she was at a party, remember, and then the lady had white carpet and she spilled wine, and she was like, well, who would have white carpet and serve people red wine? You know, like, we're always looking for that external thing to blame outside of us for the pain that's been caused. And at what point do we just surrender and say, enough is enough? And trust that we can survive and live in this world without being hard and ornery and mean and armored up and protected and in defensive mode constantly, like, oh, they said such and such to me. You know, why are we expecting the worst in everyone? Why do we expect that everything out of someone's mouth is about us? Like, we sure have big egos that we think, like, the whole thing, we're the sun. This is all revolving around me. You know, I am that powerful. But then we don't have a big enough ego to say, like, I am God. I am the divine. Like, we don't do it on the good, positive side. We only do it on the negative side, where it causes us trouble and other people trouble in our relationships. Helen Keller said, so much has been given to me. I have no time to ponder over that which has been denied. It's a pretty amazing thing to say. And I know I was like, well, that punches me in the gut. Because I'm really big on being like, well, that didn't work out the way I wanted it to, or I wish that could have happened this way. And what's that getting me? When I'm not having gratitude for the things, the abundance that is provided to me. I mean, this Thursday, when there are a lot of people who are out on the streets or don't have food to feed their families, I have a roof over my head, and I'll have more than enough food to feed probably half the neighborhood. But will I remember to say thanks for that? And that's the question that I want us all to ask ourselves this week, is will the gratitude transfer into living in that thankfulness, living in the thanksgiving? The Buddha says, let us rise up and be thankful, for if we didn't learn a lot today, at least we learned a little. If we didn't learn a little, at least we didn't get sick. And if we got sick, at least we didn't die. So let's all be thankful. I thought that was one of the funnier ones that I've really seen from Buddha. You know, how often is that a factor of your experience? Like I said, I've lived a lot of this year in a lot of pain. And I know there's been times where it's just beat me down. I mean, I think Thursday night or Friday night, which was my birthday, I'm just laying on the floor with my back like I can't get up. You know, I can't, like I'm spraying menthol biofreeze on every, you know, the whole thing. And that's hard and painful, and where's the space of like, but I didn't die. I'm still here this morning. Sometimes you wish you did. I'll say that out loud for you. Fair enough. Fair enough. But we don't, because our souls are here for whatever reason. Each of our souls are here to manifest ourselves in this world. So maybe there's something in the little things that shift and change. And actually, one of my friends from seminary just said this morning, I hope she's okay with me sharing this, that her son, their family rules, and sorry for this word again, their family rules as children were, 1, don't be an asshole, and 2, don't be racist. And that was their whole family rules. And her kids are now grown. And the 19-year-old said something to her, Mom, she was upset about something that was happening. She said, well, I at least feel a little better. And he said to her, Mom, isn't that a great new rule? Like, I at least feel a little better. And you feel that and recognize it. And that's so true. How often does we're looking for the burning bush to come in, or the instant miracle of like, oh, I'm in no pain anymore, like it's gone. But what about the little bits that we get? Where are those daily miracles that we experience? One other quote is, "Not what we say about our blessings, but how we use them is the true measure of our thanksgiving." So how are we using our gratitude? How are we out in the world? And I want to finish up with this little passage from a book that I have read. This is a really cool book called Discovering Your Soul Signature, and it's like a 33-day thing that you have to stick to. There's a morning, noon, and a night. There's a little prayer, and you kind of do a meditation, and each day is a different topic. And I found the one that was like the gratitude part of it. And this was the noon reading that he had. And it seemed really good for today. "The divine does not ask for our thanks. We are filled with breath, with life force. We walk amidst the beauty of the planet. We experience an incredible range of emotions. We are the beneficiaries of grace, and never is so much as a thank you required. Even though the divine doesn't need our thanks, what opens our hearts is the very act of appreciation. Imagine if we could live in a constant state of appreciation for all that is." Just like she said, maybe there's a way that we can find the mystery and the magic even in the folded sheets. Even in the neck pain that seems like it might not ever go away, in the stress of relationships and jobs, and this world in wildfires and stress and anxiety. You know, I know a lot of people even in seminary that have been talking about how, you know, where do we go from here? This world seems to be just falling apart. And there's a lot of sadness and a lot of like despair in that. Like, you know, the global planet thing came out a month back, and it was like, we better do things by 2025 or like 2 days from now, or we're really in trouble. And people just, there's this desperation and this sadness. And there's almost this like will to give up. And I feel like that's where that Admiral's words come in, that there's a fine line between being this perpetual optimist and Pollyanna, like everything's fine, buck up, and being able to say, some of this stuff is brutal right now. There are brutal atrocities happening in this world, even just to us in our little homes and our communities, but out in the world. But how can we have faith and have thanksgiving and be grateful for where we are and for even the little things, even the folded sheets? So let's close our eyes for a moment, taking in a deep breath and releasing with a sigh. Shaking off all of this stuff that we've been carrying. Releasing all of the to-do lists and things that we carry with us every week into this place, into our jobs, into our life every day. And just for a moment, sitting in the peace and quiet, in the gratitude, in the patience and the joy of the divine. Knowing that we are not alone in any of all of this. That we have community, that we have friends, family, loved ones, and above all else, that the divine pulses through our veins as the blood that brings us to life and the air that we breathe, that pulls us in and out of each breath. May we find this week and all weeks as we go forward a strong, sturdy, sure-footedness in gratitude and thanksgiving, knowing that we